So recently we received the nominees for 2024's Game of the Year. These are Astrobot, Black Myth Wukong, Metaphor Refantasio, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Balatro, and Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree. Technically, I know that this award show isn't the only one that exists, but it seems like it's the one that holds the most weight. Like out of all the other Game Awards shows, this one is the end all be all. With that being said, I've seen a lot of people divided on these nominees, and I just wanted to share my thoughts and the problems with them. So let's go through each of these one by one. Starting with Astrobot, this game is definitely deserving of the nominee. This game dropped at a time where Sony desperately needed a banger after the entire fiasco that was Concord. This sequel to Astro's Playroom took everything that was established in that title and made it 10 times better. The level design, music, and gameplay was more of the same, but changed it up to where it felt completely different. Add on the character specific levels and this game was just a treat. It's rare to get games nowadays that are fun for people of all ages and don't require you to pay for additional items. You just play the game and enjoy yourself. Nothing more to it. So when looking at these 6 nominees, this was a no-brainer. Next up, Metaphor Refantasio. Personally, I didn't play this game, but I definitely plan on trying it out in the future. I did play Persona 5 Royal a couple years back, so I know I'll enjoy it, even though it's not exactly the same as Persona. Atlus has been on a nice streak lately of producing great games, and it seems like Metaphor is no different. With it receiving a 94 on Metacritic, it's apparent that this game is worth everyone's time, and to be honest, I don't think we were all expecting the game to be this good. Yeah, sure, people were checking for this game, but I doubt many were thinking it would end up performing as well as it has. The situation surrounding this game just lets me know that if this title can do this good, I can only imagine how well Persona 6 will do whenever it releases. Regardless, I get why this game is a nominee. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Personally, out of these 6 games, this is my game of the year, but for others I can understand why that won't be the case. First off, this game blurs the line between remake, reboot, and sequels, so there's a discussion to be had there. Then when you consider the issues with the game, then I totally get why people would not choose this as their game of the year, or even have it as a nominee. With the game looking very blurry on performance mode, many people, including myself, were forced to play on quality mode in 30 FPS, which was a bummer. Yeah, I know that the PS5 Pro has fixed this problem, but this game is very long, and I doubt gamers will drop $700 just to play an upgraded version of a game they already beat, but I digress. Then you add on the mini games. For me, this is one of my biggest issues. It wasn't the inclusion of them because I enjoyed them all, but it was that there was too many that was forced into the story. I know that in the OG there's tons of mini games, so that made sense, but it's like they said, oh, if we're gonna go through the trouble of making all these mini games, then you're gonna play as many as possible. This was more of an issue for some more than others, but for me this was definitely annoying. Lastly, the game's pacing could have been a bit better. This wasn't a huge deal, but at times it did feel like we were deviating away from what the main goal of the game was, which was to find Sephiroth. But I think that's more the result of breaking this game up into 3 parts. When dividing this game up, it seems natural that more things are fleshed out, resulting in some sort of deviation from the main objective of the entire game. Furthermore, people had issue with how the ending was handled, as I know some people who think they completely botched that iconic moment from the OG. Regardless of how anybody else feels, I love this game from start to finish. Even with the issues that I listed, this game was incredible and I can't wait for part 3. So for me, I'm completely good with having this as a nominee. Now is where I start to have some major issues with these nominees. Black Myth Wukong. This action game from Game Science, which takes elements from both God of War and Souls games, was easily one of the biggest hits of the year. The gameplay was very addicting and the amount of boss fights this game has is actually insane. But I can't overlook the performance. Regardless of platform, this game's optimization was so poor, especially on consoles. Normally you might think, man, come on, it wasn't even that bad, but it really was. In my own review of the game, I may have downplayed it some, but looking back, the performance was terrible. Between the drop frames, screen tearing, and crashes, this game needed more time in the oven. And it's a shame because this game is actually fantastic. It's so much fun going to each of these different locations and battling through waves of enemies until you reach the boss. Finding items to aid you on your quest along with the secret areas made this game an absolute blast. But when you throw in that performance, I don't think this game should be a nominee for Game of the Year because the performance was so poor. When you think of Game of the Year, you think of a game that leaves a lasting impact on you, or maybe ones that gave you a great experience, which I had with Wukong. But I know for other gamers, the first thing they think of when it comes to that game is not the positives, but it's probably like, man, this game was so great, but if it was just optimized better, then this would win Game of the Year easily. And if you have to think like that, then the game shouldn't be a nominee. Either way, this game was fun and extremely popular, so I see why it was nominated, but personally, I wouldn't have it in my list. So on to Balatro. the card game. Another title that I never played, this is one of the games I didn't even know existed. So you could imagine my shock when I saw it on the nominee list. Then I found out it was a card game and I was like, when looking at the gameplay, it reminds me of Solitaire, which released over 30 years ago. Now since I haven't played this, I can't diss the game and say it's bad, but having a card game be in the nominees is definitely a little strange. Considering how all these other games are massive in size and popularity, having a simple card game on here left me scratching my head. On the other hand, knowing that this game was created by Local Thunk, who is literally a one-person developer, is an insane accomplishment. Creating a game is difficult regardless of its size, but doing it completely solo is even crazier. So I definitely think it's deserving of some award because of how well it did considering this information. But I gotta be honest, there's really no other games we could have put in its place. With all the controversy surrounding this year's nominees, it would be funny if this game ended up taking Game of the Year because so many fans of the other franchises would be salty. It's almost like Balatro winning is the cursed timeline, one of the realities nobody except us who like to troll want to see happen. Lastly, the nominee that has everybody up in arms, Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree. Now before I saw any of the nominees for any of the categories, I was hoping that this wouldn't get nominated. Not because I don't like the game or acknowledge its greatness, but because it's a DLC. Actually, I need to get around to playing this game to form my own opinion on it, but I'll tackle that another day. But when I started seeing it pop up for the other categories, I started to get a bit worried. I started thinking, man, there is no way this DLC is going to be nominated for Game of the Year, right? Again, I say I have no issue with the game, but this technically isn't a full game. It's an expansion slash DLC. If you want to throw this in the Game of the Year nominees, then you have to keep the same energy for the other expansions that have released in the past. Most recently, Phantom Liberty. Having just played Cyberpunk 2077 for the first time this year, that expansion was absolutely incredible. Releasing with the update that fixed a lot of the issues with the game, that expansion is one of the best in recent memory. And was it nominated for Game of the Year? Nope. That's why I don't like the fact that this Erdtree is nominated. If anything, it should be in its own category called Best DLC, Best Expansion, or something. To be thrown in with the other games that are completely new experiences doesn't make any sense. But I know some of you are like, wait a minute, you idiot. This expansion is like its own game. It's like 30 plus hours and it can be its own standalone title. Well, guess what? It's not its own game and it's not a standalone title. You can't just hop into Elden Ring and start the DLC. If you could, maybe I'd be more open to that argument. And just because an expansion is lengthy and full of content doesn't mean it should be considered as a full game. I'm really trying not to think like this, but this entire situation definitely makes me think that there could be a bias for From Software. I hate even considering this, but it's gotta be considered. I could see if Elden Ring didn't win anything before, but it won Game of the Year in 2022 plus other awards. Why even have this nominated in the first place? The only thing that I can think of is that the committee wanted to test the waters with having a DLC in the nominees, or they just went with whatever's popular. We'll truly never know, but I think it's a combination of both, honestly. I hope they aren't being biased to From Software and just throwing this game in as a nominee, because that would be insane. What's funny about this is what Jeff said right before he showed the nominees. He made sure to ensure us that he is not a part of the committee because he knew there was going to be backlash. It just makes the whole situation even funnier. He knew there was going to be slander, but let it go through anyways.
And finally, our global TGA jury, of which I am not a member, has selected the following 6 games as nominees for Game of the Year at the Game Awards 2024.
But who knows, he probably doesn't even have full control of everything that has to do with the Game Awards. It's just funny that he knew what was going to happen before announcing the nominees. But the bigger question is, what games should be nominated that aren't? There's a handful. You could replace Elden Ring and Balatro with Tekken 8, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, Persona 3 Reload, Silent Hill 2, Space Marines 2, among others. Any one of these games could be a nominee instead of what is currently there. All of these games are enjoyed and would serve as viable picks for a multitude of reasons. Which game you think should be up there is completely opinion based, but I think it's without a doubt that these are contenders. The point is that the list is flawed and maybe the categories themselves need changed. We have so many categories that people gloss completely over with other categories that need to be created. If you got rid of some categories like Best Content Creator or Best Esports Athlete and added Best Expansion or Best Remaster Remake, then this entire situation wouldn't exist. But at the end of the day, I believe that there are biases involved, and this show is no different than the VMAs, Oscars, and other award shows. Whatever is the most popular or well received is nominated, period. And if that's the case, then none of us should be surprised. Hopefully any of the other 5 games, even Balatro, win Game of the Year, because if Elden Ring does win, we may get studios releasing expansions instead of full games, and think that's enough to satisfy consumers. Regardless, we'll see what happens on December 12th. What do you think about these Game of the Year nominees? Do you agree with the list, or would you make some changes? Let me know in the comment section below, and if you enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a like or subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.